going to stay in the snow, in fact, for the business news now, because it's coming straight from Davos this week, of course, where political and business leaders from right around the world have come together to discuss the major issues facing and shaping the rapidly changing economy. Our business editor, Kate Moody, has been following events for us, of course. She's back with us again now, live from Davos.
Well, Stuart, the star attraction this Thursday morning is going to be Theresa May. Her speech on Tuesday addressing that 12-point plan for Brexit has kept her in the spotlight throughout the week. In Davos, she'll be likely giving a much broader view of how she sees the United Kingdom's place in the world moving forward. We'll, of course, be covering that speech and reaction here from Davos throughout the morning. Now, though, I'm pleased to say I'm joined by Omar Alghanim, the CEO of Alghanim Industries, chairman of the Gulf Bank as well. Thanks so much for speaking to us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Now, some of the themes that we've been addressing here at the World Economic Forum, protectionism, isolationism, globalism, how do you think that has affected your industry for better or worse?
Well, if you look at the gains that globalization has brought about to the global economy over the last 20 years, it's been unprecedented in the history of the planet. We've had GDP growth, global GDP growth, growing at levels that have never happened before. And now we see Theresa May, whose speech you're covering tomorrow, Trump with some of his anti-globalization talk that's been going on. And it's scary because the world is underpinned upon globalization. If you look at an automotive assembly plant anywhere in the world, it has parts from 20 different countries coming in there. And if trade barriers and these types of old nationalistic type trends coming back in, it could have effects on the global economy that I think no one really understands. And I think that type of volatility is always scary to a businessman like myself and to investors and to the people who care about the global economy. And please.
No, well, it sounds like you're certainly cautious as you anticipate the incoming Trump administration.
Well, I think, as one looks at an administration coming in and a certain president comes in with an ideology, with a party, and that puts certain guardrails around what's going to happen. The way that I look at the Trump administration is that he could hit the ball out of the park, and it could be a tremendous success, or that it could go badly, and there's volatility there. And I think that's always worrying for a businessman such as myself. But I think the thing that's encouraging is that Trump is a businessman himself and does care about the economy. So I think that's encouraging. But one looks at the largest economy in the world, the largest military power in the world, and looking at that type of volatility, that's always a bit worrying. But it could create a tremendous amount of value, but it could also be a little bit risky on the downside.
Now, you've got business interests in over 40 countries around the world, but in particular in the Middle East and North Africa. Yeah. What kind of an impact have you been seeing on the broader economy of that region in terms of oil prices?
Well, in the Gulf, we are a single commodity-led region, largely. And you've seen the UAE make strong strides where they have 30% of their GDP linked to oil now, with targets for that going down to 20%. But countries such as Kuwait, where the GDP, 80% of our GDP is linked to oil. So we have a lot of strides to make to move away from being dependent on that one commodity. A lot of that around education, getting our youth involved into inclusive economies. Because inclusive economies where youth get involved is how we stop radicalization. It's how we stop the Al-Qaeda's, the IS, or whatever you want to rebrand it as. But any type of radicalization comes in when you have disenfranchised people who don't feel like they're part of these economies. And so that's what we need to work harder on. I work hard on that by working with several different organizations and trying to get youth involved into our economies.
Well, youth empowerment, but also gender diversity is something that you've been quite outspoken about. Why is that such an important issue for you?
Well, if you look at women in our part of the world and the amount of inclusivity they have into the economy, it's the lowest anywhere in the world. And women in our part of the world have such a tremendous amount of value to add. If you look at my company, and look at the amount of women that we bring in to our workforce. We have all sorts of programs trying to get women to come in. And we've been successful at getting women to come in at a junior level, but not as successful as getting women to span their careers and develop as to become senior management. And it's because a lot of societal norms and pressures on women to go and have families and do things like that, and not really accepting them having a career and having a family at the same time. So I think we as a region, we as business leaders need to work to do that, because as a region, in order for us to be successful, we need to be competitive. And we can't be competitive without half of our workforce coming in. And there's empirical evidence to show that organizations that don't have women at the top aren't as effective as organizations that do. And we as a region are sorely not underrepresented with women in our senior management ranks.
Much more to say on that, but I'm afraid we're out of time now. Omar Alghanim, thank you so much for speaking to us on France 24. We've just got time to take a quick check of how the markets are faring this Thursday morning. A fairly flat open for the European markets. Investors will be keeping an eye on the European Central Bank, which will be meeting in Frankfurt later. Mario Draghi expected to defend his stimulus program. We saw a mixed close on the Asian markets. Toshiba shares tumbling 16% as it said that it might be selling off its semiconductor business. We will be back later on from Davos with more on Theresa May and all the other issues being discussed here in the Swiss Alps.
Thanks very much, Kate. Kate Moody there, covering Davos for us from the Swiss Alps.